Do not touch that shelf, Rowan said. Someone already removed everything around her name. Alara froze with her hand inches from the wood. The east annex of the Old Moon Court had been sealed for years, but the shelf before her did not look abandoned. It looked edited. Brass labels ran in perfect sequence until they reached an empty space nearly 3 feet wide, then continued as though nothing had ever been stored there. Cale lifted his lantern. What should be missing? Rowan opened the routing index they had carried from Blackstone. Continuity files from the final years of the verification office. Alara felt a chill. The same office connected to my bride registry? Yes. Adrian stepped closer. If those files were transferred, the index should say where. Rowan searched the corresponding entries. His expression tightened. It does not. Alara stared at the gap. Her preliminary bride registry had carried an obsolete code that led directly to this annex. Yet the section most likely to explain it had vanished. So someone removed the files. We know they are missing, Rowan said. We do not yet know why. Cale glanced at Alara, but he did not interrupt. She had come too far to replace uncertainty with the answer she wanted. Then we keep looking. They searched the neighboring shelves without disturbing their order. Most boxes contained ordinary closure inventories, payroll lists, and routing logs from offices dissolved years earlier. Nothing mentioned Alara. Nothing explained why her name had been connected to a forgotten verification system. Then Adrian crouched beside the lowest shelf. Rowan. Behind a thick storage ledger sat a narrow gray box. Dust covered the lid unevenly, as if it had been pushed out of sight before the annex was closed. Rowan knelt beside it. Nobody move it yet. He read the handwritten number along its edge, then checked the routing index. This container does not belong on this shelf. Adrian studied the prefix. That is protected continuity storage. Alara's heartbeat quickened. Is it listed in the inventory? Rowan turned several pages. No. Cale lowered the lantern, revealing a faint mark beneath the dust. A crescent, crossed by one short line. Alara recognized it immediately. It was the same obsolete verification symbol that had appeared beside her name before her wedding. For a moment, the room seemed to shrink around her. That cannot be coincidence, she whispered. Rowan looked at her. It is a connection. We still have to prove what it means. Alara nodded. That was enough. She no longer needed the truth to arrive dramatically. She needed it to survive scrutiny. Rowan documented the box exactly where they found it, then compared its number with the surviving routing tables. The final digits matched the routing family attached to your bride registry. Adrian looked toward the empty shelf above them. Then perhaps this was supposed to disappear with the others. Perhaps, Rowan said. Or perhaps it was never stored with them. Alara crouched near the box without touching it. Someone had removed an entire section of records, but one unlisted container remained hidden behind an ordinary ledger. Can we open it? Not yet. First we verify the seal. Rowan turned the index toward the lantern and stopped. Near the bottom of the page was a tiny notation almost lost in the binding. He read it twice. Protected continuity exception. Cale's gaze sharpened. Meaning? Rowan looked at the gray box. Meaning certain records were intentionally kept outside the ordinary index, so the protected subject could not be found through a normal search. Alara felt the implication settle slowly. The box might not have survived because someone forgot it. It might have survived because someone had hidden it from the people who knew where to erase. She looked at the crescent beneath the dust. Then this was never lost. Rowan met her eyes. No. Someone may have wanted it to wait for the right person to find it. Rowan did not open the box. He first copied its routing number, location, and seal into his notes, then carefully sketched the shelf arrangement and marked the exact position where the container had been found. Alara watched with impatient understanding. Yesterday, she might have wondered why paper needed so much ceremony. Now she knew that a truth without a reliable trail could become another argument. The exception mark tells us why the box is absent from the ordinary index, Rowan said. It does not authenticate what is inside. Cale held the lantern closer. What will? A secondary confirmation. Protected continuity files were designed so no single index revealed both the subject and the location. Adrian studied the old routing book. Hart once mentioned that system. He said the safest record was sometimes the one nobody could find unless they already knew how to ask for it. Alara looked at him. Did he tell you where those records were kept? No. That was the point. Rowan examined the box without disturbing the seal. The crescent matched the symbol beside Alara's name on the preliminary bride registry, but he refused to call that proof. Instead, they moved to a narrow desk and searched the annex closure materials. Most entries led nowhere useful. Then Rowan found a section labeled Protected Continuity Exceptions. The page explained that certain containers could be excluded from transfer inventories if public indexing might expose the subject. Their existence had to be confirmed through a separate authentication reference. Where is that reference? Alara asked. Rowan turned the page. Nothing followed. The next sheet began an unrelated section. Adrian frowned. There should be a verification strip. Not here. Cale looked toward the missing shelves. Could it have been removed with the other files? Possibly. Alara exhaled. Another promising clue had ended in silence. She walked back toward the shelf, forcing herself not to let disappointment become a conclusion. The box still existed. That mattered. Behind her, Rowan closed the routing index, then paused. Wait. Something inside the back cover had caught against his thumb. A thin paper strip had been fixed beneath the binding cloth, so faded it looked like part of the book itself. He carefully unfolded it. 3 authentication symbols appeared beside coded routing numbers. Adrian leaned closer. That middle mark is Hart's. Rowan compared it with Hart's authenticated signature from the Blackstone inquiry. The narrow crescent, verification line, and registration pattern matched. Then he read the routing number beneath it. Alara recognized the final digits before he spoke. They were the same as the gray box. Hart authenticated it, she said. He authenticated the continuity reference, Rowan corrected. That confirms this container belonged to a protected case he verified. We still have not established who the subject was. Alara nodded. The difference no longer frustrated her. Each careful limit made the next fact harder to dismiss. Adrian stared at Hart's mark. He never told me about this. If you were involved as a witness, keeping you unaware of the storage location may have been part of the protection, Rowan said. Cale looked from the hidden strip to the box. Can we verify the seal now? Rowan compared the registration pattern on the strip with the faint impression beneath the dust. After a long moment, he nodded. The marks are consistent. We have enough to examine the container under witness. Alara moved closer. Then open it. Rowan studied a small line beneath the crescent and stopped. Not me. She frowned. Why? He turned the box toward her. Under the seal, almost invisible until the dust was cleared, were 3 stamped words. Subject return required. Adrian went completely still. Cale looked at Alara. It was waiting for the person inside the record. Rowan nodded. If this procedure means what I think it means, no archivist, advisor, or king has the authority to open it alone. Alara stared at the seal. For 19 years, other people had decided what she could know about her own beginning. Hart had apparently designed one final safeguard against that happening again. She reached toward the box, then stopped before touching it. Find the procedure, she said. I want to know exactly what choice he left me. Rowan found the procedure in a thin volume stored with the closure rules. The language was formal, but the meaning was simple. A container marked subject return required could remain sealed until the protected person returned voluntarily and requested access. No royal order could replace that consent. No witness could provide it on the subject's behalf. Alara read the rule twice. So even Cale could not order. This open? No, Rowan said. Not under the procedure that created it. Cale gave the box a quiet look. Good. Alara turned toward him. Good. Whatever is inside belongs to your history. You should decide whether you want it. The answer settled something inside her. Rowan loosened only the outer binding, leaving the inner seal untouched. Beneath the lid rested a thin packet wrapped in faded archival paper and a single handwritten page. Alara recognized Dr. Hart's writing before anyone said his name. Rowan stepped back. You should read it. She lifted the page carefully. The first sentence made her breath catch. If this packet is being opened by the protected subject, then the ordinary historical chain has either failed or become unsafe. Adrian lowered his eyes. Alara continued. Hart explained that official archives could be altered, reorganized, or placed under people whose interests changed. For certain vulnerable cases, continuity and witness verification maintained a second path. It revealed almost nothing unless the person at the center of the case returned and chose to reclaim access. He expected the archive might fail, Alara said. He prepared for the possibility, Rowan replied. That does not prove he knew someone would interfere with it. She nodded. She had begun to hear the difference between evidence and anger. Hart's next lines were more personal. The child connected to the disputed succession review was not to become an instrument for anyone seeking influence through lineage. Her identity could be separated temporarily from searchable records, but the separation was never meant to become ownership. If she returned as an adult, restoration had to begin with her decision. Alara lowered the page. He knew enough to hide me, but not enough to tell me why. Adrian's voice was quiet. Perhaps he believed not knowing made you safer. It also left me wondering whether anyone had cared enough to remember me. No one tried to correct her. Cale stood beside her without defending Hart. After a moment, he said, protection can be necessary and still cost someone something. Alara looked at him. I am grateful he tried. She glanced at the sealed packet. And I am angry that I lost 19 years of answers. Both can be true. She returned to Hart's page. Near the bottom, he had written that no archivist, advisor, witness, family representative, or royal officer could authorize the final identity release. The protected subject had to state a current name, confirm voluntary return, and personally request the truth. Rowan checked the old procedure. It matches. Adrian stared at Hart's signature. He never told me any of this. That may have protected both of you, Rowan said. If you did not know where she was, you could not reveal it. Alara turned the page over. One final sentence stood alone on the back. If history forgets her, let no one restore her, without first asking who she chooses to be. The annex fell silent. Alara looked at the inner packet. Somewhere beneath that seal might be the identity she had lost, the reason she had been hidden, or another question waiting behind the first. But Hart had done one thing no one else in her past seemed to have done. He had left the final choice with her. Alara placed her fingertips against the seal. My name is Alara, she said. I came here by my own choice. Rowan waited. Do you request access to the protected continuity record? She thought of the empty shelf, the missing index entries, and the crescent that had followed her all the way from her bride registry to this forgotten room. Then she looked at Cale. He did not nod for her. He did not answer for her. He simply waited. Alara turned back to the packet. Yes, she said. I want to know what they tried to make history forget. Alara broke the inner seal. The sound was small, almost ordinary, but no one in the annex moved as she unfolded the packet. Inside rested a cream-colored document protected between two thin archival sheets. There was no royal crest, no ceremonial language, nothing that looked important enough to have survived 19 years of secrecy. At the top were 4 simple words: continuity verification record. Rowan leaned closer without touching it. Start with the dates. Alara found the first entry. It belonged to the period of the Northern Succession Review. Beneath it, the subject was identified only as a protected female minor connected to the disputed witness line. No name, Alara said. That was probably intentional, Rowan replied. The first layer established the case without exposing the child. A verification field carried Hart's authentication. Below it was another coded mark. Adrian drew a slow breath. That one is mine. Cale looked at him. Your witness code? Yes. I used it when I examined restricted records. Rowan opened the surviving personnel reference and found the matching entry. Adrian Voss, Records Advisor. The code is consistent. Alara looked from the page to Adrian. So Hart connected your testimony to this case without telling you who the child was. Adrian nodded. He knew what I had verified. He never told me where the child went. Alara understood the design now. Hart had divided the truth so no single person could expose all of it. Rowan pointed to a continuation mark near the bottom. A second sheet lay folded behind the first. Alara opened it. One field had been covered by a narrow paper seal, stamped subject authorization required. Another choice? She asked. It appears so, Rowan said. That seal protects the identity designation. Alara lifted it herself. Beneath it was an old family reference she did not recognize, followed by a notation connecting the protected child to the original witness line entry. Then she saw another line written later in Hart's hand. Current protected name, Alara. Her breath caught. He knew my name. Rowan examined the dates. Not when the original record was created. This was added later. Adrian stared at Hart's handwriting. Then he found out where she had gone. Or received confirmation of the name under which she was protected, Rowan said. We cannot tell which from this document alone. Alara looked again at her name. For years, she had imagined herself disappearing into a blank space no one had bothered to follow. Yet Hart had preserved a connection between the hidden child and the woman standing here now. Cale spoke softly. Whatever that older designation means, it does not replace your name. She looked at him. I know. And she did. The discovery did not feel like becoming someone else. It felt like learning that part of her past had survived. Rowan continued down the page. This establishes a historical connection between Alara and the protected child, assuming final authentication confirms the document. Does it prove the old succession claim? Cale asked. No. It establishes continuity of identity. It does not reconstruct every missing part of the succession record. Alara appreciated the boundary. One surviving document could restore a fact without answering every question. Then Adrian noticed the final section. There should be a closure field. Rowan found it beneath Hart's entries. It was not blank. A later notation appeared in different handwriting beside an unfamiliar authorization mark. Alara saw Rowan's expression change. What does it say? He read it once before answering. Protected separation converted to permanent historical suppression. Cross-references to subject identity to be closed. Alara stared at the words. Hart wrote that. Rowan compared the handwriting, date, and authorization mark. No, Adrian leaned closer. When was it entered? Rowan checked the date. Nearly 2 years after Hart created the original protection. The meaning arrived with terrible clarity. Hart had hidden a child while preserving her right to return. Someone else had later changed the purpose of that protection. Alara looked from Hart's careful handwriting to the colder amendment beneath it. She had spent years believing history had simply lost her. Now she knew that someone had deliberately changed the record, so finding her way back would become far more difficult. Alara read the amendment again. Permanent historical suppression. The words were cold and administrative, but their effect was painfully clear. Hart had preserved a way for her identity to be recovered. Someone else had later tried to make that recovery nearly impossible. Cale stood beside her, his attention fixed on the unfamiliar authorization mark. Who had the authority to change Hart's protection? Rowan opened the procedural volume. Not Hart himself, at least not alone. Temporary separation could be approved when revealing a minor's identity. Created a documented risk. Permanent suppression required a higher level of authorization. Adrian studied the date. The Moon Court had already been sealed by then. Yes, Rowan said. But the verification office continued handling unresolved cases for 2 more years. Alara remembered the timeline they had established at Blackstone. The court had stopped functioning publicly, while its remaining administrative work continued behind closed doors. So whoever entered this order used a system that was still active. According to the date, yes. That troubled her more than the idea of someone secretly changing a dead archive. This had not required slipping into a forgotten room. Someone had apparently used legitimate authority to make her history harder to recover. Alara pointed to Hart's original entry. What exactly changed? Rowan turned the document toward the lantern. Hart separated your protected identity from ordinary searches, but he preserved a restoration process. The later order closed the cross-references connecting your current identity, the witness line, and the succession review. So if I returned years later and searched under the name Alara, you would have found almost nothing connecting you to this case. Cale looked toward the gray box. But the document itself survived. Yes. Rowan checked the relevant rule. Protected continuity files required separate authorization for destruction. This amendment orders suppression, not disposal. Adrian glanced toward the empty shelves, which could explain why the surrounding references disappeared while this remained. Possibly, Rowan said, but we still do not know who removed the missing files or when. Alara nodded. She wanted conclusions strong enough to survive people who might prefer a simpler explanation. Then what can we prove? Rowan answered immediately. Hart preserved a protected identity connection and a method for future restoration. Nearly 2 years later, another authority ordered the searchable references closed. The second action fundamentally changed the effect of the first. Did Hart approve it? Adrian asked. Rowan examined the authorization fields. His mark is not here. Adrian's expression tightened. He would never have agreed to this. Alara turned toward him. You believe that? Adrian stopped. After a moment, he nodded. Yes, I believe it. I cannot prove it. Then we do not clear him by memory any more than we accuse someone else by suspicion. Rowan gave her a brief approving glance. There may be a way to learn more. At the bottom of the amendment were two authorization fields. One carried an unfamiliar coded mark. The second appeared empty. Rowan checked the procedure. An order at this level required an authorizing officer and an acknowledgement witness. Kale leaned closer. Then where is the witness? Rowan carefully lifted the protective backing. A faint pressure impression crossed the sheet beneath it, as though another strip of paper had once rested there. He searched the packet and found a narrow folded slip tucked behind the archival layer. Several coded entries appeared on it beside the same amendment date. Adrian recognized the format. Administrative identifiers. Rowan compared the first code with Hart's credentials. Not Hart. Alara felt her heartbeat quicken. Can you identify it? Not from this volume. But it is connected to whoever authorized the suppression? It appears to be. We need the personnel register before we say more. Alara studied the code. For most of her life, she had feared there was no reason for her missing past, that she had simply been too unimportant for anyone to preserve. The surviving evidence told a different story. Someone had used procedure and authority to make the truth about her difficult to recover. She touched the edge of Hart's original entry. I was not forgotten. Kale watched her carefully. Alara lifted her eyes to the unfamiliar code. Someone made an official decision that history should forget me. Alara kept her eyes on the unfamiliar identifier. Why erase someone who was already gone? Rowan did not answer immediately. He placed Hart's original protection beside the later suppression order, aligning the dates. That may be the question that explains everything else. Adrian studied the timeline. When Hart created the first record, Alara was a child caught inside a disputed succession review. Nearly 2 years later, the immediate crisis had already passed. Kale looked toward him. Then why make the suppression permanent? Adrian shook his head. I do not know. Alara studied the language, closing every searchable connection to her identity. Maybe the child was no longer the problem. Kale understood first. Her future was. Rowan raised a hand slightly. Possible motive. Not established fact. Alara nodded. Then tell me the effect. Rowan pointed to the amendment. Without the surviving continuity file, an adult Alara searching under her own name would have had almost no documented connection back to the witness line. The suppression did more than conceal where the child had gone. It made future restoration extremely difficult. Alara felt the distinction settle inside her. Hart left a door. Someone removed the road leading to it. That is supported by what we have, Rowan said. Kale's expression hardened, but his voice remained controlled. Then identify the authority behind the order. Rowan unfolded the coded slip from the packet. The identifier contained 3 sections separated by small dots. The first indicates administrative level. The second identifies the authority class. The final section should correspond to an individual credential. Adrian leaned closer. The level is senior. How senior? Alara asked. Above ordinary records administration. Rowan opened a personnel register stored with the annex closure materials. These registers were kept together because they were required to reconcile unresolved cases when the office shut down. He traced the authority codes until he found a match. Historical continuity override. Kale read the description beside it. What could that override? Restricted identity decisions involving succession, treaty obligations, or recognized lineage claims. The room seemed colder. Alara stared at the code. Someone had not treated her disappearance as a minor clerical matter. They had used authority reserved for questions capable of affecting the crown. Does it give us a name? Rowan turned to the personnel listing for that period. For senior positions carried the required level. 3 had names beside them. The 4th did not. Appointment date, service term, and authorization class remained intact, but the officer field was blank. Adrian frowned. That should not be empty. Could someone have removed the name? Kale asked. Rowan examined the page. There is no obvious physical alteration. It may have been omitted from this surviving copy, or removed before the copy was created. Alara stared at the blank field. Another absence, exactly where an answer should have been. So we have a position, but no person. For now. Rowan returned to the suppression order. The override still required an acknowledgement witness. Alara looked at the empty second field. Another missing name. On this document, Rowan said. But acknowledgement transactions were often recorded separately because the witness did not need access to the protected subject's identity. Adrian straightened. There should be a transaction register. Rowan nodded toward a row of closure volumes. Unlike the identity files, those registers tracked administrative actions. They may still be intact. Cale picked up the lantern. Then that is where we look next. Alara remained beside Hart's record for another moment. She had entered the annex wanting to discover who she had been. Instead, the evidence was revealing why someone might have feared what her identity could someday mean. She touched the edge of the suppression order. They were not only closing my past, she said. Rowan looked at her. Alara raised her eyes toward the shelves holding the transaction registers. They were trying to make sure I could never use it in my future. Rowan found the transaction register exactly where the closure index said it should be. Unlike the protected identity files, these volumes tracked administrative actions rather than people, which meant whoever had stripped Alara's history from the searchable archive may have had little reason to remove them. Adrian stood across the desk, while Rowan turned to the date of the suppression order. Cale remained beside Alara, holding the lantern high enough for all four of them to see. There, Adrian said. One line carried the same. Historical continuity override class, the same date, and the same routing reference as Alara's amendment. At the end was a second identifier. Alara leaned closer. The acknowledgement witness? It should be, Rowan said. Now we identify the code. The personnel register listed internal officers first, but the number did not match any of them. Rowan turned to a separate section. External continuity witness. Adrian's expression changed. That makes sense. Cale looked at him. Why? When an override involved a possible conflict inside the administration, an approved witness from outside the office could acknowledge the authority without receiving the protected person's identity. Alara studied the code. So this witness may have known someone ordered a permanent suppression without knowing it was me. Exactly, Rowan said. He followed the identifier through the directory. Part of the entry had faded, but two details remained readable. A surname beginning with C and a first initial, M. Adrian went still. I remember someone who may fit that code. Rowan looked at him. A memory gives us a lead, not an identification. Mara Caldwell, Adrian said. She worked with protected family relocations before the Moon Court closed. Rowan searched a second service list and found the names several pages later. Mara Caldwell, external continuity witness. Her credential series matched the surviving identifier. Alara felt the past shift again. Until now, every path toward the person behind the suppression had ended in a blank field. Mara was different. She was a name. Then she witnessed the order, Alara said. The evidence strongly indicates she acknowledged its administrative entry, Rowan replied. That does not mean she knew every detail. Cale pointed to the procedure. Would she have seen the person who authorized it? Possibly. She was required to confirm that the authorizing officer held valid override authority. She may have seen credentials or received the order directly. Alara felt hope rise, but she kept it measured. Can we find her? Rowan checked Mara's service history. Her name appeared for another year after the suppression order, then vanished from the Moon Court administrative lists. There was no transfer entry, no retirement notation, no death record in the volume. Adrian frowned. She disappeared too. Her record ends here, Rowan corrected. We do not know what happened afterward. Alara gave him a small nod. She had learned the danger of turning an empty space into whatever story fear preferred. Where else would her service have been recorded? Cale asked. Rowan examined the witness classification. External witnesses were sometimes moved into separate relocation or pension systems when sensitive offices closed. Those records were administered outside Moon Court. Blackstone. Some were eventually transferred there. Adrian looked toward Alara. If Mara lived long enough to enter that system, there may be a later trail. Alara stared at the name. Mara Caldwell. A stranger who might have stood in a room nearly 2 decades earlier while someone formally closed the path to Alara's identity. She might know nothing useful. She might remember only a signature, a credential, or a voice. But for the first time, the mystery had moved beyond codes and missing paper. It had reached another human being. Rowan copied Mara's identifier and closed the register. We take this back to Blackstone. There we can compare it against the later external service records without disturbing anything else in this annex. Cale nodded. Then we leave the original files here under seal until proper custody is arranged. Alara looked once more at Hart's protected document. It had given her more than proof that she had existed. Hart had built enough separation into the system that one erased trail had failed to erase every witness around it. She touched Mara's copied identifier. Someone removed the name of the person who ordered my history closed, she said. But they missed the person who had to watch them do it. By the time they returned to Blackstone, evening had settled over the castle. Rowan carried the surviving document inside its archival case, while Adrian brought the copied routing references and Mara Caldwell's identifier. Alara walked beside Cale in silence. She had entered the East Annex hoping to recover a missing piece of her past. Instead, she had learned that someone had once used official authority to make that past almost impossible to reclaim. In the Royal Council chamber, Rowan placed the sealed case on the blackwood table. Several council members had been summoned to witness its transfer. Before anyone reached for it, Alara spoke. Who decides what happens to the original? A councilman glanced toward Cale. A document connected to an unresolved succession matter would normally enter Crown custody. Alara felt the old discomfort immediately. Once again, people were discussing her history as something an institution might possess. I am not asking whether it should be protected, she said. I am asking whether anyone can take control of my identity simply because it matters to the Crown. The room quieted. Cale could have answered with royal authority. Instead, he looked at Rowan. What do the rules allow? Rowan opened the procedural volume they had brought from the annex. The Crown has a legitimate interest in preserving evidence. But this was created as a protected identity file, and its restoration procedure gives the subject specific rights. The councilman frowned. That office no longer exists. The office does not, Rowan said. The authenticated procedure and surviving document do. Alara looked at Cale. His voice remained calm. Then we protect the evidence without taking her history away from her. Rowan nodded. There is a straightforward solution. The original remains in protected archival custody. I create a certified copy for the Royal Inquiry. Alara files a restoration acknowledgement establishing that she personally reclaimed the historical connection. And the old family designation? Alara asked. Does restoration make that my legal name? No. It establishes continuity. It does not require you to abandon the name under which you live. Alara looked down at Hart's handwriting through the protective covering. For years, she had wanted answers so badly that she had imagined finding them would somehow transform her. Now that the truth was in front of her, she understood something different. Knowing where she came from did not require surrendering. Who she had become. Rowan prepared the certified copy under 2 witnesses. Adrian remained away from the table unless asked to confirm an administrative code. When the process was complete, Rowan placed a single form before Alara. The first field contained the historical designation preserved in Hart's file. The second asked for the current identity under which restoration was requested. Alara took the pen. She thought of the hidden child connected to the witness line. She thought of the girl who grew up without knowing why the past had gone silent. She thought of the bride who came to Blackstone carrying a name that others once believed meant very little. Then she wrote it clearly. Alara. Rowan examined the form. You understand that this restores the historical connection, but does not resolve the old succession dispute. Yes. And the investigation into the suppression order remains open? Yes. He signed beneath her acknowledgement. Then the restoration is valid. No forgotten memory returned. No title appeared. No ancient lineage made her more worthy than she had been 5 minutes earlier. Yet something inside her settled. Her past could no longer be discussed as though she had no voice in what it meant. Cale waited until the officials stepped away before reaching for her hand. How does it feel? Alara considered the question. Not like becoming the person I was supposed to be. Then what? She looked at her signature. Like realizing no one else gets to decide who I am supposed to be. Cale's fingers closed gently around hers. Across the table, Rowan secured the original document. There is still Mara Caldwell. Alara looked at the copied witness identifier. Somewhere beyond the vanished Moon Court records was a woman who might know who had authorized the order. We find her, Alara said. But not because I need her to tell me who I am. Cale met her eyes. Why then? Alara looked from Hart's preserved record to the name she had chosen to keep. Because knowing who I am does not mean I stop asking who tried to erase me. The next morning, Rowan asked the Royal Council to confirm only what the evidence could support. He did not retell every discovery. From the East Annex, he placed the certified continuity record beside Alara's signed restoration acknowledgement and spoke plainly. We can establish 3 things. Alara was the protected child connected to the disputed witness line. Dr. Hart preserved a lawful path for her identity to be restored. Nearly 2 years later, someone with senior override authority ordered that path closed to ordinary historical searches. A councilwoman studied the documents. Can we identify that person? Not yet. Can we prove why the order was issued? No. Rowan rested one hand beside the file. But the suppression itself was deliberate. That is no longer speculation. Alara felt the words settle without overwhelming her. Yesterday, she might have needed the room to understand what had been taken from her. Today, she needed something simpler. Accuracy. Cale looked around the table. Then the official inquiry will state exactly that. Nothing more. No one challenged him. Adrian sat farther down the table, no longer treated as the center of the mystery. His testimony remained evidence to be verified, but the surviving document had changed the direction of the investigation. Alara looked at the restoration acknowledgement bearing her name. There is one thing I want included. Rowan waited. My historical connection can be restored without turning it into a judgment of my worth. A councilman frowned slightly. Meaning I was worthy of respect before anyone found that record. Her voice remained calm. If my bloodline matters to the historical inquiry, investigate it. But no title, lineage, or succession claim gets to decide whether I deserve to be remembered. Cale's expression softened. Alara continued. They closed the road back to the child I was. They do not get to erase the woman I became. Silence followed, but this time it did not feel empty. Rowan closed the inquiry file. Then we moved to the remaining lead. He placed Mara Caldwell's copied identifier on the table. Last night, I compared this witness code with Blackstone's external service archives. Adrian leaned forward. You found her. I found a later trail. Alara's heartbeat quickened. Rowan opened. A thin service ledger. Mara disappears from Moon Court personnel records about a year after the suppression order. But her authenticated witness code appears again 12 years after the verification office closed. Cale's attention sharpened. Where? On a sealed continuity transfer received through the protected relocation system. Does that prove she was alive then? Alara asked. It strongly indicates that someone using her authenticated credential completed the transaction. I want the original transfer record before concluding more. Alara nodded. Even now, Rowan would not give hope more certainty than it had earned. Where did the transfer go? Rowan turned the ledger toward them. A private settlement north of Blackstone. It was used for retired witnesses and administrative personnel whose previous work required continued privacy. Adrian stared at the entry. I have heard of those settlements. I never knew which one she entered. We still do not know that she remained there, Rowan said. But this gives us a place to begin. Cale looked at Alara rather than issuing an order. Your choice. 2 words, and she understood everything behind them. The record had been hers to open. The name had been hers to keep. This decision would be hers as well. Alara looked at Mara Caldwell's identifier. The woman might remember nothing. She might have known only the authority code and never the face behind it. She might not even be alive now. But the investigation had finally moved beyond blank fields and missing shelves. Somewhere north of Blackstone was the last confirmed destination connected to the witness who had acknowledged the order that buried Alara's history. We go north, Alara said. Rowan nodded. Adrian remained silent. Cale reached for her hand only after she turned toward him. Alara looked once more at Hart's record. It had already proved that her disappearance from the historical record had not been entirely accidental. Now it had done something more. It had left a path toward the person who might remember who gave the order to forget.